Maria Rodriguez, a night cleaning lady at Techno Global Corporation, discovers a critical $200 million financial error while cleaning the CEO's office late one evening. Despite being dismissed and underestimated by executives, her keen observation and quick thinking saved the company from bankruptcy. The Millionaire CEO, initially skeptical of a cleaning lady's capabilities, is shocked to learn that Maria holds an MBA in finance from her home country, but works as a cleaner due to immigration barriers. This discovery leads to her promotion and a complete transformation of both her life and the company's approach to recognizing talent regardless of position. Pharisees da Maria Rodriguez pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway of Techno Global Corporation's 42nd floor, the wheels squeaking softly against the pristine surface. It was 11:47 p.m., and the towering Manhattan office building hummed with the quiet energy of a sleeping giant. She had been cleaning these offices for 3 years now, invisible to the executives who rushed past her during the day as if she were part of the furniture. The weight of exhaustion pressed against her shoulders as she approached the corner office, the one belonging to CEO Jonathan Pierce. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sparkled like scattered diamonds, but Maria barely noticed the view anymore. She was focused on getting home to her small Queens apartment, where her teenage daughter Carmen was probably still awake, working on homework at their tiny kitchen table. As she used her master key to unlock Pierce's office, Maria couldn't help but think about the conversation she'd overheard earlier between two executives in the elevator. They had been discussing budget cuts and workforce reduction, their voices carrying that casual tone people use when discussing numbers rather than human lives. She had pressed herself against the back wall of the elevator, hoping to become even more invisible than usual. The CEO's office was a monument to success. Mahogany desk, leather chairs that probably cost more than Maria made in 6 months, and walls lined with awards and photographs of Pierce shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. But tonight, something was different. Pierce's usually immaculate desk was covered with scattered papers, coffee-stained documents, and what looked like financial reports with red ink corrections scrawled across them. Maria began her routine, emptying the trash bins and dusting the surfaces. She had learned long ago to keep her eyes down and her thoughts to herself, but as she cleaned around the desk, fragments of conversation from the papers caught her attention. Words like quarterly loss, investor meeting, and emergency board session seemed to leap off the pages. She wasn't trying to read the documents, she knew better than that. But as she moved to clean the computer monitor, her eyes inadvertently fell on a spreadsheet displayed on the screen. The numbers were enormous, more zeros than she had ever seen in one place, but something about them made her pause. Maria had always been good with numbers. Back in Colombia, before life had forced her to make impossible choices, she had been an accountant for a mid-sized firm. She could spot numerical inconsistencies the way others might notice a crooked picture frame. And right now, staring at Pierce's computer screen, something was very, very wrong. The spreadsheet showed quarterly projections, and there was a formula error that was so glaring, so obvious, that Maria couldn't understand how it had gone unnoticed. Someone had miscalculated a decimal point, a simple mistake, but one that had multiplied across hundreds of entries, inflating the company's projected losses by exactly $200 million. She stepped back from the computer as if it had burned her. This wasn't her business, she was just the cleaning lady, cleaning. But the numbers kept swirling in her head, and she found herself calculating the correct figures almost automatically. In her mind, she could see exactly where the error had occurred and how to fix it. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her jump. She quickly returned to her cleaning, but her hands were shaking as she wiped down the desk. The footsteps passed by, probably another late-night worker heading home, but Maria's heart continued to race. She tried to focus on her tasks, polishing the glass coffee table, vacuuming the Persian rug, arranging the throw pillows on the leather sofa, but her eyes kept drifting back to that computer screen. The error was eating at her like a song stuck on repeat in her mind. Maria had spent years making herself invisible, years accepting that her education and experience meant nothing in this country where her accent marked her as different, where her immigration status limited her options, where cleaning offices was the only work she could find that paid enough to support Carmen and send a little money back to her mother in Bogota. But standing in that office, surrounded by the trappings of power and success, something stirred inside her, a memory of who she used to be, who she might still be underneath the uniform and the silence. She glanced at the door, then back at the computer screen. What if she was wrong? What if this wasn't actually an error but some complex financial calculation she didn't understand? She was, after all, just a cleaning lady who hadn't worked in finance for over a decade. But what if she was right? The thought of the company losing $200 million, of the layoffs that would surely follow, of families like hers being torn apart by decisions made in boardrooms by people who never had to worry about rent or groceries, made her stomach turn. She thought about Carmen, about the other cleaning staff who depended on their jobs, about the security guards and maintenance workers and cafeteria employees who would be the first to go if the company failed. Maria looked around the office one more time, at the diplomas on the wall, at the expensive art, at the view of the city that seemed to stretch on forever. Tomorrow, men in $1,000 suits would sit around the conference table and make decisions about people they had never met, people whose names they would never know. But tonight, in this moment, she was the only one who had seen the error. She was the only one who could fix it. Her hand moved toward the computer mouse almost without her conscious decision. Just a small correction, just moving one decimal point to the right place. 2 minutes of work that could save the company and protect hundreds of jobs. But as her fingers hovered over the mouse, doubt crept in again. Who was she to interfere? What if there were consequences? What if they discovered what she had done and fired her? She couldn't afford to lose this job, couldn't risk everything for a company that barely acknowledged her existence. The cleaning cart's squeaky wheel seemed to echo her indecision as she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Through the windows, the city continued its relentless dance of light and shadow. Millions of people sleeping peacefully, unaware that their lives might be about to change because of a simple mathematical error. Maria closed her eyes and thought of her daughter's face, of the pride in Carmen's voice when she talked about her college applications, of all the dreams that hung in the balance of this moment. When she opened her eyes, her mind was made up. If this story is already making you think about courage and taking chances, tell me from which place in the world you're listening to this. Maria's finger trembled as it hovered over the computer mouse. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the financial documents scattered on Pierce's desk. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, drowning out the distant sounds of the city 42 floors below. She clicked on the spreadsheet cell where the error originated. The formula bar displayed the calculation, and there it was, clear as day. Someone had entered 2.00 instead of 0.02 in a critical multiplier that affected every subsequent calculation. It was the kind of mistake that happened when people worked too many hours under too much pressure, the kind of error that could destroy a company and thousands of lives. Maria's hands moved with surprising steadiness as she made the correction. She changed the 2.0 to 0.02 and watched as the entire spreadsheet recalculated automatically. The massive projected loss of $347 million suddenly became a manageable $147 million, still significant, but not the catastrophic figure that would trigger massive layoffs and potential bankruptcy. She saved the file and stepped back from the computer, her legs feeling weak. What had she just done? A cleaning lady had just altered the financial records of a Fortune 500 company. The weight of her actions settled on her shoulders like a lead blanket. But as she stared at the corrected numbers on the screen, Maria felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the satisfaction of using her mind, of solving a problem that mattered. For just a moment, she wasn't invisible. For just a moment, she was the woman she used to be in Bogota, the accountant who could find discrepancies that others missed, who could make sense of complex financial puzzles. The sound of the elevator chiming down the hall snapped her back to reality. She quickly minimized the spreadsheet and grabbed her cleaning supplies, but her movements were clumsy with adrenaline. A bottle of glass cleaner slipped from her hands and clattered to the floor, the sound echoing through the quiet office like a gunshot. "Hello? Is someone there?" a voice called from the hallway. Maria's blood turned to ice. She recognized that voice. It was Richard Hawthorne, Pierce's chief financial officer, a man who barely glanced at the cleaning staff when he passed them in the corridors. She could hear his footsteps approaching, the confident stride of someone who belonged in these halls of power. She bent down to retrieve the fallen bottle, her mind racing. Should she hide? Should she pretend to be focused on her cleaning? Should she run? Hawthorne appeared in the doorway, his expensive suit wrinkled from a long day, his tie loosened around his neck. He looked exhausted, older than his 50-something years, with the hollow-eyed expression of a man carrying the weight of an impossible situation. "Oh," he said, seeming genuinely surprised to see her. "It's just the cleaning lady." He rubbed his forehead with the heel of his hand. "I thought I heard something." Maria nodded, not trusting her voice. She focused on cleaning the glass coffee table, hoping he would leave so she could escape this office and pretend the last 10 minutes had never happened. But Hawthorne didn't leave. Instead, he walked to Pierce's desk and slumped into the leather chair, staring at the computer screen with the expression of a condemned man. He clicked to open the spreadsheet Maria had just corrected, and she watched his face change as he studied the numbers. "That's impossible," he muttered, leaning forward. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. "These numbers, they're different from what we calculated this afternoon." Maria's hands stilled on the glass surface. This was it, the moment when her interference would be discovered, when her fragile world would come crashing down. Hawthorne began clicking through the spreadsheet, tracing the calculations with growing amazement. "The loss projections, they've dropped by $200 million. How is that possible?" He looked up at the ceiling as if seeking divine intervention. "We've been over these numbers 100 times. The board meeting is tomorrow morning, and we're supposed to announce the biggest loss in company history." He started checking the formulas more carefully, his movements becoming more animated as he discovered the correction. There was an error, he breathed. A massive error in the base calculation. Someone fixed it. He spun around in the chair, his eyes wild with a mixture of relief and confusion. "But who? I was the last person to leave tonight, and these corrections weren't here when I left." His gaze fell on Maria, who was still frozen by the coffee table, clutching her cleaning cloth. For a moment their eyes met, and she saw something flicker in his expression. Not suspicion exactly, but curiosity. "Did you see anyone else up here tonight?" he asked. "Any other executives working late?" Maria shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. Her mouth felt dry as sand. Hawthorne turned back to the computer, muttering to himself, "This is incredible. These corrections are perfect. Whoever did this knows exactly what they're doing. This could save the company." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Jonathan, I know it's late, but you need to get down here immediately. Something's happened with the quarterly projections." He paused, listening. "No, something good. Something very good." As Hawthorne continued his phone conversation, pacing back and forth behind the desk, Maria realized this was her chance to leave. She quietly gathered her supplies and began backing toward the door. "Wait," Hawthorne called out, causing her heart to skip a beat. "I'm sorry, I don't know your name." "Maria," she said softly, her accent making the single word sound like a confession. "Maria, right. Listen, did you notice anything unusual tonight? Any computers left on that shouldn't have been? Any signs that someone else was working in this office?" Maria's mind raced. She could lie, could pretend she had seen nothing, knew nothing, or she could tell the truth and face whatever consequences followed. She thought about Carmen at home, probably asleep now over her textbooks. She thought about her mother in Colombia, waiting for the monthly transfer that helped pay for her medications. She thought about all the other cleaning staff who would lose their jobs if the company failed. "The computer," she said quietly, gesturing toward Pierce's desk. "It was on when I came in. The spreadsheet was open." It wasn't exactly a lie, she told herself. The computer had been on. Hawthorne nodded, seeming satisfied with this explanation. Someone must have been working late and made the corrections before leaving. But why didn't they tell anyone? Why didn't they send an email or leave a note? He was talking more to himself than to her, trying to solve a puzzle that had no logical solution. The elevator chimed again, and moments later CEO Jonathan Pierce strode into the office, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his shirt untucked. "Richard, this better be important," Pierce said, then stopped when he saw Maria. "Why is the cleaning staff still here?" "She was just leaving," Hawthorne said quickly. "But Jonathan, you need to see this. The quarterly projections. Someone corrected a massive error. We're not looking at a $347 million loss anymore. It's $147 million. Pierce's expression shifted from irritation to stunned disbelief. "That's impossible. We checked those numbers repeatedly." "Look for yourself," Hawthorne said, stepping aside so Pierce could see the computer screen. As the two executives huddled around the monitor, Maria quietly slipped toward the door, but Pierce's voice stopped her. "Wait a minute," he said, his tone sharp with suspicion. "You said the cleaning lady was here when you arrived, Richard?" "Yes. She said the computer was already on when she started cleaning." Pierce studied Maria with the calculating gaze of a man accustomed to finding the truth behind complicated situations. She felt exposed under his scrutiny, as if he could see through her carefully constructed invisibility. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maria Rodriguez, sir." "How long have you worked here, Maria?" 3 years, sir." And you clean this office every night? Yes, sir. Pierce exchanged a glance with Hawthorne. In 3 years of cleaning this office, have you ever seen financial documents left open on the computer before? Maria's heart hammered against her ribs. This was dangerous territory. One wrong answer could unravel everything. Sometimes, she said carefully, when people work late. But tonight was different? I don't understand, sir. Pierce continued to study her face, and Maria had the uncomfortable feeling that he was seeing something others had missed. After a long moment, he turned back to Hawthorne. We need to figure out who made these corrections. Check the system logs. See who accessed this computer tonight. This kind of precision doesn't happen by accident. If you're feeling the tension build and want to know what happens next, tell me from which corner of the world you're following Maria's story. As Maria finally escaped into the hallway, her legs barely carrying her to the elevator, she realized that her 2-minute decision had set in motion events she couldn't control. The correction was discovered, but now they would be looking for whoever made it, and sooner or later they would find her. Maria barely slept that night. She lay in her narrow bed in the Queen's apartment she shared with Carmen, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment in Pierce's office. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, every sound from the street below made her jump. She kept imagining security guards at her door, police officers with handcuffs, her daughter's face when she discovered her mother had been arrested for corporate fraud. When her alarm went off at 6 a.m., she felt like she had been hit by a truck. Carmen was already at the kitchen table, surrounded by college application essays and financial aid forms, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Mommy, you look terrible," Carmen said, looking up from her laptop. "Are you getting sick?" "Just tired, mija," Maria replied, forcing a smile. "You're up early." "I couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about these applications." Carmen gestured at the papers spread across the table. "The deadlines are coming up, and I still need to write the essay about overcoming challenges. I don't know how to explain, Ma, you know our situation without sounding like I'm asking for pity." Maria poured herself coffee with shaking hands. Her daughter had no idea how much their situation might be about to change. Carmen was brilliant. Honor roll, debate team, volunteering at the community center. She had been accepted to 3 universities already, but they were all waiting to hear about financial aid packages. "Write about your strength," Maria said, sitting down across from her daughter. "About how you never gave up, even when things were difficult. They need to see who you really are." Carmen smiled, the same bright expression she'd had as a little girl. "Thanks, Mommy. I don't know what I'd do without you." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. What would Carmen do without her? What would happen if Maria lost her job, if she was arrested, if their carefully constructed life fell apart because of her moment of interference? 2 hours later, Maria stood outside the Techno Global building, staring up at the glass tower that had been her workplace for 3 years. Other cleaning staff members were arriving for the day shift changeover, chatting in Spanish and English about their families, their weekend plans, their everyday concerns. Maria envied their normalcy. She rode the elevator to the 42nd floor with a knot of anxiety in her stomach. The executive floor was bustling with unusual activity for 9 a.m. Normally, the executives didn't arrive until later, but today, there were voices behind closed doors, phones ringing constantly, and an energy that felt both electric and ominous. Maria made her way to the cleaning supply closet, hoping to lose herself in routine tasks, but as she gathered her materials, she overheard fragments of conversation from the nearby conference room. "System logs show no external access after 7 p.m. Had to be someone with physical access to the office. Level of expertise suggests financial background." Her hands froze on the handle of her cart. They were investigating. They were looking for whoever had made the correction, and they were getting closer to the truth. "Maria!" a voice called out, and she nearly dropped the bottle of cleaning solution she was holding. It was Jennifer Walsh, the head of human resources, a woman who had never spoken to Maria directly in 3 years. "Yes, ma'am," Maria replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Pierce wants to see all the night cleaning staff in the conference room in 10 minutes. There's been a situation that requires some questions." Maria's legs felt like they might give out. "What kind of situation?" "Nothing to worry about," Jennifer said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "Just some routine questions about last night." As Jennifer walked away, Maria leaned against the supply closet wall, trying to breathe normally. This was it. They were going to question everyone who had been on the floor last night. They would ask about what she had seen, what she had done, and somehow they would figure out the truth. She thought about running. She could take the elevator down, walk out of the building, pick up Carmen from school and disappear. But where would they go? They had no money saved, no family in America, nowhere to hide, and running would only confirm her guilt. 10 minutes later, Maria found herself in the same conference room where she had watched executive meetings through the glass walls while cleaning. Now she was inside, sitting at the massive mahogany table alongside 4 other night cleaners, Rosa, Miguel, Elena, and David. They all looked nervous and confused. Pierce entered the room, followed by Hawthorne, and a woman Maria didn't recognize, someone in a severe black suit with the bearing of law enforcement. Maria's heart sank even further. "Good morning," Pierce said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "I want to thank you all for taking time to speak with us. As you may know, something unusual happened last night on this floor, and we're trying to understand exactly what occurred." The woman in the black suit stepped forward. "I'm Detective Sarah Chen with the NYPD Financial Crimes Unit. I want to assure you that you're not in trouble, but we need your cooperation in understanding the events of last night." Financial Crimes Unit. Maria felt the blood drain from her face. This wasn't just about corporate policy anymore. This was criminal investigation territory. "Between 10 p.m. and midnight last night," Detective Chen continued, "someone accessed sensitive financial information in Mr. Pierce's office and made corrections to critical documents. These corrections prevented what could have been catastrophic losses for the company, but they were made without authorization by someone who shouldn't have had access to this information." Rosa, who had been cleaning offices for 15 years, raised her hand tentatively. "Are you saying we're suspects?" "We're saying that whoever did this had to have physical access to the executive floor during night hours," Hawthorne replied. "The system logs show no electronic intrusion, no remote access. Someone was physically present at Mr. Pierce's computer." Detective Chen opened a notebook. "I'm going to ask each of you some questions about your movements last night. Who was responsible for cleaning Mr. Pierce's office?" "That would be me," Maria heard herself say, her voice sounding strange and distant. All eyes turned to her, and she felt like a specimen under a microscope. Pierce studied her face with that same calculating expression from the night before, as if he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Maria Rodriguez," Detective Chen read from her notes. "You've been employed here for 3 years, cleaning the executive floor. Last night you entered Mr. Pierce's office at approximately what time?" Around 11:45, Maria stammered. "And what did you observe when you entered the office?" This was the moment. Maria could feel her future hanging in the balance of her next words. She could lie, could say she had seen nothing unusual, and maybe they would never figure out the truth, or she could tell them what really happened and face the consequences. "The computer was on," she said carefully. "There were papers everywhere on the desk. It looked like someone had been working late." "Did you touch the computer?" Detective Chen asked. "No, ma'am, I just cleaned around it." "Did you see anyone else on the floor? Hear any voices or movement?" "Mr. Hawthorne arrived while I was cleaning." Hawthorne nodded. "That's correct. I came back to the office around midnight and found Maria cleaning. The corrections had already been made to the spreadsheet by then." Detective Chen made notes, then looked up at Maria again. "In your 3 years of cleaning this office, have you ever noticed financial documents before? Do you understand what you're looking at when you see spreadsheets and reports?" Here it was, the question Maria had been dreading. She could say no, could pretend to be just a simple cleaning lady who wouldn't know a financial document from a grocery list, but something in Detective Chen's eyes suggested she already suspected there was more to Maria than met the eye. Sometimes I notice things," Maria said slowly, "but I try not to look at private papers." "But you can read English well enough to understand financial documents?" "Yes, ma'am." Pierce leaned forward. "Maria, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need you to be completely honest. Do you have any background in finance or accounting?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Maria could feel the other cleaning staff looking at her with confusion and growing suspicion. Rosa was frowning, as if seeing Maria clearly for the first time. Yes, Maria admitted quietly. "Before I came to America, I worked as an accountant in Colombia." The room fell silent, except for the sound of Detective Chen's pen scratching against paper. Pierce and Hawthorne exchanged meaningful glances. "You have accounting experience," Pierce said slowly, "and you were alone in my office last night with access to financial documents that contained a $200 million error, an error that was corrected with the kind of precision that suggests advanced financial knowledge." Maria's hands were shaking in her lap. "Sir, the system logs show the corrections were made at 11:52 p.m., Detective Chen interrupted. Just a few minutes after you entered the office. Can you explain that coincidence? If you're on the edge of your seat wondering if Maria will confess, drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I love knowing where these stories travel. Maria looked around the table at the faces staring at her, some suspicious, some confused, some pitying. She thought about Carmen, about her mother in Colombia, about all the dreams that were about to crumble, but mostly she thought about the truth and whether she was brave enough to tell it. The silence in the conference room stretched on like a taut wire ready to snap. Maria could hear the distant hum of the city below, the whisper of the air conditioning, the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Every face around the table was turned toward her, waiting for an answer that would either condemn or absolve her. Detective Chen's pen was poised over her notepad, and Pierce's steel-gray eyes seemed to see straight through to her soul. Maria realized that this moment had been inevitable from the second she touched that computer mouse. There was no more hiding, no more pretending to be invisible. "Yes," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "I made the correction." The admission hit the room like a thunderclap. Rosa gasped audibly. Miguel muttered something in Spanish under his breath, and Hawthorne's eyebrows shot up toward his hairline. But Pierce's expression didn't change. If anything, he looked almost relieved, like a detective who had finally gotten a confession that confirmed his suspicions. "Why?" Detective Chen asked, leaning forward. "Why would you risk your job, potentially face criminal charges, to fix a company's financial records?" Maria's hands trembled in her lap as she searched for words to explain something she wasn't sure she fully understood herself. "Because it was wrong," she said finally. "The numbers were wrong, and I knew people would lose their jobs because of it. But it wasn't your responsibility," Pierce said, his tone unreadable. "You're employed as a cleaning person, not a financial analyst." "I know that, sir, but—" Maria took a shaky breath. "I saw the error, and I couldn't just walk away. I kept thinking about all the families who would suffer, all the people who would lose their jobs because of a mistake that I could fix in 2 minutes." Detective Chen made more notes. "Tell us about your background, Maria. Your real background." And so Maria did. For the first time in 3 years, she spoke about who she really was. She told them about her degree in accounting from Universidad Nacional in Bogotá, about her 8 years working for Empresas Bolívar, one of Colombia's largest conglomerates. She explained how she had been the senior accountant responsible for quarterly reports affecting thousands of employees. "Then why are you cleaning offices?" Hawthorne asked, his tone more curious than accusatory. Maria's voice caught as she explained about the violence that had forced her family to flee Colombia, about arriving in New York with Carmen when her daughter was just 10 years old, about the language barriers and credential recognition issues that had made it impossible to work in her field. "My accounting degree means nothing here," she said. "No one will hire an immigrant woman with an accent for a finance position, no matter what her qualifications are. So I clean offices to survive, to pay rent, to keep my daughter in school." Pierce was studying her with a new intensity. "But you've been maintaining your skills somehow. The correction you made wasn't just spotting an obvious error. It required understanding complex financial modeling and international accounting standards." Maria nodded. "I read financial journals at the library. I take online courses when I can afford them. I help other people in my community with their taxes and small business accounting. I never stopped being an accountant, even if America doesn't recognize me as one." The room fell quiet again as everyone processed this information. Rosa was looking at Maria as if seeing her for the first time, which in many ways she was. Detective Chen broke the silence. "Technically, what you did constitutes unauthorized access to corporate financial systems. That's a serious crime, regardless of your intentions." Maria's stomach dropped. "I understand, I'm sorry, I know it was wrong, but..." "However," Detective Chen continued, "the fact that your actions prevented massive financial losses and potentially saved the company complicates the situation significantly. The district attorney's office will have to decide whether to press charges." Pierce stood up suddenly, startling everyone in the room. He began pacing behind his chair, his mind clearly working through something complex. "Maria," he said finally, "in your professional opinion, how long would it have taken our financial team to discover this error on their own?" Maria considered the question carefully. "Based on the complexity of the spreadsheet and where the error was buried, probably not until after the quarterly report was filed, maybe not until the audit next year. And the financial impact of that delay? The company would have made decisions based on false information, budget cuts, layoffs, possibly filing for Chapter 11. By the time someone found the error, it might have been too late to reverse the damage. Hawthorne was shaking his head in amazement. She's right. We were planning to announce the layoffs at tomorrow's board meeting. We would have cut 20% of our workforce based on those false projections. Pierce stopped pacing and turned to face Maria directly. You saved this company, Maria. You saved thousands of jobs, including your own. But more than that, you demonstrated a level of professional competence and ethical responsibility that puts many of our executives to shame. I don't understand, Maria said, confused by the shift in tone. 3 years, Pierce said, his voice gaining intensity. For 3 years you've been invisible in this building. You've cleaned our offices while we've been struggling with financial problems that you could have solved. You've listened to us make decisions that you knew were wrong while pretending to be just a cleaning lady. He turned to Detective Chen. I want to make something very clear. Techno Global Corporation will not be pressing charges against Maria Rodriguez. In fact, we owe her a debt of gratitude that I'm not sure we can ever repay. Detective Chen looked surprised but made another note. That's your prerogative as the victim of the alleged crime. Without your cooperation, we don't have a case. Pierce nodded, then turned back to Maria. But that raises another question. What do we do now? We can't just pretend this didn't happen. We can't go back to having you clean offices while your talents are wasted. Maria felt like she was in a dream. Was Pierce actually suggesting what she thought he was suggesting? Sir, I don't have the credentials to work in finance in this country. You're just someone who spotted and corrected a $200 million error that our entire financial department missed, Pierce interrupted. You're just someone with the integrity to risk everything to do what was right. You're just someone who's been hiding her light under a bushel for 3 years. He sat back down and leaned forward, his expression intense. Maria, I'm going to make you an offer. Techno Global will sponsor your credential recognition process. We'll pay for whatever certifications or examinations you need to work as an accountant in the United States. And when that process is complete, we'll offer you a position in our financial department appropriate to your skills and experience. Maria felt like the room was spinning. What? Furthermore, Pierce continued, we'll provide a transition salary during the credentialing process so you don't have to worry about supporting your family, and we'll establish a scholarship fund for your daughter's education. Tears began streaming down Maria's face. After 3 years of being invisible, of pretending to be less than she was, of watching her daughter worry about college costs while she cleaned the offices of people who made millions, this felt like a miracle. But even through her tears, Maria's practical nature asserted itself. Why? She asked. Why would you do this for me? Pierce smiled for the first time since the meeting began. Because talent like yours shouldn't be wasted, regardless of what uniform you're wearing or what accent you have, because this company has been making a terrible mistake for 3 years by not recognizing what we had right under our noses, and because if we don't start valuing people for their abilities rather than their circumstances, we'll keep missing opportunities like this. He gestured toward the other cleaning staff, who had been listening to this exchange with growing amazement. How many more brilliant minds are we overlooking because we only see janitors and cleaning ladies instead of human beings with rich histories and valuable skills? What comes next is even stronger, and to not miss the ending, tap the subscribe button now. It's free and you'll be with me in every news story. Rosa wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Maria, you never told us you were an accountant. I didn't think it mattered, Maria replied. Here, I was just the cleaning lady. Not anymore, Pierce said firmly. Never again. As the meeting began to wrap up, Maria felt like she was stepping out of one life and into another. But even in her overwhelming gratitude, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much larger than her personal transformation. 3 months later, Maria sat in a conference room on the 38th floor of Techno Global, but this time she was on the other side of the table. Her cleaning uniform had been replaced by a navy blue business suit. Her hair was styled professionally, and a nameplate reading Maria Rodriguez, Senior Financial Analyst, sat in front of her laptop. The transition hadn't been easy. The first few weeks had been a whirlwind of paperwork, examinations, and intense studying to bring her U.S. accounting certifications up to date. Techno Global had hired the best tutors and provided access to accelerated certification programs, but Maria had still spent countless nights at her kitchen table, surrounded by study materials, while Carmen helped quiz her on American tax law and gay AAP standards. You're going to pass, Mummy, Carmen had said one particularly stressful evening when Maria was second-guessing herself. You corrected a $200 million error in 2 minutes. I think you can handle a certification exam. Carmen had been right. Maria had not only passed, but scored in the top 5% of all test takers nationwide. The examining board had been so impressed that they'd expedited her credential recognition process, and within 6 weeks, she was officially certified to practice accounting in New York State. Now, as she reviewed the quarterly projections for Techno Global's third quarter, Maria marveled at how dramatically her life had changed. The numbers on her screen represented not just financial data, but the livelihoods of thousands of employees who no longer had to fear unexpected layoffs based on calculation errors. "Maria, excellent work on the Southeast Division analysis," said Janet Morrison, the chief financial officer who had been promoted after Hawthorne moved to a consulting role. "Your insights on the supply chain optimization could save us millions in the fourth quarter." Maria smiled, still sometimes surprised when executives spoke to her as an equal rather than looking through her as if she were invisible. "Thank you, Janet. I've also identified some potential issues with the European subsidiary reporting that we should address before the next board meeting." "What kind of issues?" Pierce asked from the head of the table. In the months since Maria's discovery, he had made it a point to include her in all major financial reviews, often saying that fresh eyes were the company's most valuable asset. Maria pulled up another spreadsheet on the projection screen. "There are some currency hedging calculations that appear to be based on outdated exchange rates. If we don't correct them, we could be looking at a $15 million exposure in the euro markets." The room fell silent as the other executives studied her analysis. Maria had learned to expect this moment of pause, not because her colleagues doubted her abilities anymore, but because they were still adjusting to having someone who could spot problems others missed. "How did you catch this?" asked David Kim, the head of international operations. "Our European team just sent these reports yesterday. I've been tracking the exchange rate fluctuations for the past month," Maria explained. "When I saw the hedging calculations, the numbers didn't match the current market conditions. It's the same kind of systematic error that created the problem 3 months ago. Someone used old data in a formula and didn't verify it against current market conditions." Pierce nodded appreciatively. "What's your recommendation?" "We need to implement a real-time verification system for all currency-dependent calculations. I've drafted a proposal for automated cross-checks that would flag discrepancies before they make it into official reports." As Maria explained her proposal, she noticed something that would have been impossible 3 months ago. People were taking notes on what she was saying. These executives, who collectively held decades of experience and advanced degrees from prestigious universities, were learning from the woman who used to empty their trash cans. After the meeting, Pierce asked Maria to stay behind. When the conference room had emptied, he walked to the windows overlooking Manhattan and gestured for her to join him. "How are you adjusting?" he asked. "Really adjusting, not just the polite answer you give everyone else." Maria considered the question carefully. "It's strange," she admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. Other times I feel like I'm finally being who I was meant to be. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Pierce replied. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened 3 months ago, and I keep coming back to one question. How many other people are we overlooking? How many brilliant minds are hiding in plain sight because we only see job titles instead of human potential?" "What do you mean?" Pierce turned to face her fully. "I mean, I want to create a program based on what happened with you. I want Techno Global to actively seek out and develop talent wherever we find it, regardless of what role someone currently holds." Maria felt a familiar excitement building, the same feeling she'd had the night she spotted the error. "You want to look beyond the surface." "Exactly. I want you to head up this initiative. We'll call it the Hidden Talent Program. Your job would be to identify employees throughout the company who might have skills and knowledge that aren't being utilized in their current positions." The proposal was both thrilling and terrifying. "Jonathan, I've only been in this role for 3 months. Are you sure I'm ready for something like that?" "Maria, you've been ready for years. You just needed someone to give you the opportunity." He paused, looking out at the city skyline. "Besides, who better to identify hidden talent than someone who was hidden herself?" Over the following weeks, Maria threw herself into developing the Hidden Talent Program. She interviewed employees from every department: security guards, cafeteria workers, administrative assistants, maintenance staff. What she discovered amazed even her. There was Roberto in building maintenance, who had been an electrical engineer in El Salvador before immigrating. He had been troubleshooting complex building systems for years, while officially being paid to change light bulbs. There was Susan in the cafeteria, who had a master's degree in nutrition science and had been quietly helping co-workers with dietary issues while serving lunch. There was Michael in security, who was fluent in 4 languages and had been informally translating for international visitors, while his linguistic skills went completely unrecognized. Each discovery reinforced Maria's belief that talent was everywhere, waiting to be noticed and nurtured. But the program also faced resistance from some managers who were uncomfortable with the idea that their assumptions about employees might be wrong. "This is disruptive," complained Bradley Matthews, a senior vice president who had been with the company for 15 years. "We have hiring procedures for a reason. We can't just promote people based on hidden credentials. We're not talking about automatic promotions," Maria explained during a heated departmental meeting. "We're talking about giving people opportunities to develop and use their full potential." Roberto in maintenance has prevented 3 major electrical failures this year because he understands systems that most of our contracted engineers miss. Susan in the cafeteria has helped 12 employees manage diabetes and food allergies, potentially saving the company thousands in health insurance costs. These people are already contributing beyond their job descriptions. We're just finally recognizing it. The debate continued for weeks, but Maria had a powerful ally in Pierce, who had become convinced that the Hidden Talent Program represented the future of the company. When the quarterly numbers came in showing record profits, partly due to the cost savings from Maria's various financial optimizations, it became harder for critics to argue against looking for talent in unconventional places. The program's first major success came when Roberto identified a design flaw in the building's new HVAC system that could have cost the company $2 million to fix after installation. His recommendation for a simple modification during the installation phase saved enormous time and money. "This is exactly what I was talking about," Pierce announced at the next board meeting. "Roberto has been working in our building for 5 years, fixing our equipment, understanding our systems better than anyone else. But because he was labeled as maintenance, we almost missed his ability to save us millions. If this story of hidden potential and second chances is inspiring you, tell me from which place in the world you're following along. Your support means everything to me." As Maria listened to Pierce present the program's successes to the board, she thought about how much had changed since that night when she'd stood trembling in his office, wondering if she should risk everything to correct a simple error. But she also realized that her own transformation was just the beginning. The real victory would be creating a company, and maybe inspiring a movement, where no one's potential remained hidden because of preconceptions about what they were supposed to be. The meeting was going well, but Maria could see some board members remained skeptical. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that talent could be found anywhere if you were willing to look beyond the surface. And Maria was ready for whatever came next. 1 year after that fateful night in Pierce's office, Maria stood at the podium of the Techno Global Auditorium, looking out at an audience of over 500 employees. The same people who had once looked through her as if she were invisible were now hanging on her every word. But more importantly, scattered throughout the audience were faces that told the real story of transformation. Roberto, now the head of facilities engineering; Susan, who had become the corporate wellness director; Michael, who led the new international communications department. "When I walked into Mr. Pierce's office that night," Maria began, her voice steady and clear, "I thought I was just a cleaning lady who had noticed a mistake. I never imagined that 2 minutes of courage would change not just my life, but the lives of so many others." The Hidden Talent Program had exceeded everyone's expectations. In its first year, it had identified and developed 127 employees whose skills had been underutilized. The program had generated over $50 million in cost savings and innovation improvements, but more importantly, it had fundamentally changed the culture of Techno Global. Maria continued her presentation, sharing the statistics that still amazed her. "We've discovered that 34% of our workforce has educational qualifications or professional experience that goes far beyond their current job descriptions. We've learned that some of our most innovative solutions come from people who understand our operations from perspectives we never considered." In the front row, Carmen sat beaming with pride. She was now a freshman at Columbia University, studying business administration with a focus on organizational psychology. The scholarship fund Pierce had established had covered her full tuition, but more than that, Carmen had been inspired by her mother's story to study how companies could better recognize and develop human potential. "The cleaning lady who saved us $200 million," Carmen had written in her college admissions essay, is my mother, but she's also a metaphor for how many brilliant minds we overlook every day because we see uniforms instead of people, accents instead of intelligence, job titles instead of human capability. As Maria moved through her presentation, she noticed Detective Chen in the audience. The same woman who had questioned her about unauthorized access to corporate systems was now studying the Hidden Talent program as a model for police departments struggling with diversity and community engagement. What Ms. Rodriguez discovered, Detective Chen had told a criminal justice conference the previous month, is that crime isn't just about punishment, it's about recognizing when people are forced into situations that don't match their capabilities. Maria wasn't a criminal, she was a professional trapped in the wrong role by circumstances beyond her control. The presentation reached its climax as Maria introduced the newest initiative, the National Hidden Talent Network. Techno Global had partnered with 12 other major corporations to share best practices and create opportunities for talented individuals to find appropriate roles regardless of their current employment situation. We've learned that talent doesn't respect borders, doesn't care about accents, and doesn't diminish because someone is working in a job that doesn't match their education, Maria explained. What matters is creating systems that can recognize and nurture potential wherever it exists. Pierce joined her on stage for the final portion of the presentation. Maria has taught us that the most expensive mistake a company can make isn't a financial calculation error. It's failing to see the human resources that are already within our walls. The $200 million error was caught and corrected in 2 minutes, but how many years did we waste by not recognizing Maria's capabilities? How many other talented people are still waiting for someone to notice their potential? The audience erupted in applause, but Maria was thinking about something else. A letter she had received that morning from a woman named Elena Petrov in Detroit. Elena worked as a night custodian at an automotive company, but she had been an aeronautical engineer in Russia before immigrating. She had read about Maria's story in a business magazine and was asking for advice about how to transition back to her professional field. The letter was one of hundreds Maria had received from people around the country, immigrants, career changers, people whose circumstances had forced them into survival jobs that didn't reflect their true capabilities. Each letter reminded her that her story was part of something much larger than one person's success. After the presentation, Maria found herself in Pierce's office, the same office where her life had changed, but now she was there as an invited guest rather than an invisible service worker. The mahogany desk was still imposing, but it no longer intimidated her. The view of Manhattan was still spectacular, but now she felt like she belonged in that view rather than just cleaning around it. "I have something to show you," Pierce said, pulling out a framed newspaper article. It was from the Wall Street Journal with the headline, "The 200 Million Cleaning Lady, How One Employee's Courage Sparked a Corporate Revolution." Maria smiled, remembering the reporter who had spent weeks trying to understand how a simple error correction had led to such widespread organizational change. "I still can't believe people want to hear this story. It's not just your story anymore," Pierce replied. "It's become a symbol of something people desperately need to believe, that talent and potential can emerge from anywhere, that it's never too late to become who you're meant to be." He walked to the window and gestured toward the city below. "Do you know what I see when I look out there now? I see millions of people who might be working in the wrong jobs, whose potential is being wasted because no one has figured out how to look beyond the surface. I see cleaning ladies who might be engineers, security guards who might be teachers, cafeteria workers who might be scientists." Maria joined him at the window. "And what are we going to do about it? We're going to change the world, one hidden talent at a time." 3 months later, Maria received a phone call that would mark another turning point in her journey. It was from the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, inviting her to join a federal task force on workforce development and talent recognition. "Ms. Rodriguez," the caller explained, "your work with the Hidden Talent Program has come to the attention of the President's economic advisors. We believe your approach could be scaled to address national challenges with unemployment, immigration integration, and economic competitiveness." As Maria hung up the phone, she thought about the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. From a frightened cleaning lady, making a 2-minute decision in an empty office, to a federal advisor, helping to shape national policy, it seemed impossible, like something that happened to other people in movies, not to immigrant women from Queens. But she also thought about Elena Petrov in Detroit, about the hundreds of other letters she'd received, about Roberto and Susan and Michael, and all the other talented people still waiting to be discovered. The phone call wasn't really about her success. It was about creating opportunities for people whose stories hadn't been told yet. That evening, Maria sat at her kitchen table with Carmen, working on college applications together. But this time they were applications for graduate programs in organizational psychology that Carmen wanted to pursue after finishing her bachelor's degree. "I want to study how companies can build more inclusive cultures," Carmen explained as she typed. "I want to understand why it took TechnoGlobal 3 years to recognize your abilities and how we can prevent that from happening to other people." Maria smiled, watching her daughter articulate dreams that had grown directly from their shared experience of struggle and transformation. "What will you say when people ask you why this matters to you?" Carmen looked up from her laptop, her expression serious and determined. "I'll tell them about the night my mother saved a company by being brave enough to use her mind instead of hiding it. I'll tell them about how one moment of courage can change everything, not just for one person, but for everyone who comes after." If you want to keep hearing stories like this, tap the red button that says subscribe. It's free and it helps me keep sharing these powerful stories of courage and transformation. As Maria tucked the acceptance letter from the White House task force into her desk drawer next to Carmen's college acceptance letters, she realized that the real victory wasn't her personal success. It was the knowledge that somewhere in the country, another person who felt invisible was reading their story and thinking, "Maybe I don't have to hide who I really am." The cleaning lady who had saved $200 million had become something much more important. Proof that talent can emerge from anywhere, that courage can transform not just individual lives, but entire systems, and that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the simplest acts of integrity. Outside their Queen's apartment window, the lights of Manhattan twinkled like promises in the darkness, and Maria knew that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to help other hidden talents find their way into the light. The error had been corrected, the company had been saved, and the transformation was complete. But the real work, the work of seeing people for who they truly are rather than what they appear to be, was just beginning.